Again, many thanks for staying with us right here on the number one show in the country, Morning at NTV. My name is Romeo Busika, and I'm here with a very pertinent conversation, largely centering around decriminalization of petty offences in Uganda. Yes, you do have stakeholders meeting that was held on the 24th of September. That was last year. It was a Thursday. I remember very well. And you did have the Executive Director of the Human Rights Awareness and Promotion Forum, Mr. Adrian Juko, who was talking to the stakeholders and saying we need to criminalize these petty offences because they are so outdated and they do not serve the purposes of the local populace in that regard. He also went on to say that the white man invented many of these laws to keep the black man very far away. Yes, and to also implement taxes that would keep the white man into his long reign in power. So many of these laws were meant to suppress the black and vulnerable poor instead of actually empowering them in that regard. So why are we not decriminalizing all these petty offences in our Penal Code Act? Why is government adamant to do so? Even as human rights activists have been up in arms calling for government to do the same, even in September last year. And then we are back here on the 8th of June 2021, just having the same conversation on how best we can actually call on government to actually expunge many of these petty laws from our law books. If you talk to the police spokesperson, Fred Nanga, he concurred with us, the human rights activists, and he said we should have removed these laws as soon as yesterday, and these laws do not serve the purpose of the poor people, but he said he will continue as police to implement most of these laws because they are still in the law book. So it's incumbent on Parliament to actually take on its role of expanding most of these laws and coming up with new offences that will go a long way in alleviating this challenge. That is as per the High Court Registrar, that is Flavia Nasolo. But then on set with me, I have two very intelligent individuals. I have Flavia Zalwango. She is a human rights activist and she is the Program Director of Research and Advocacy at the Human Rights Awareness and Promotion Forum. She is passionate about human rights. So you just know that's an individual who is going to be largely acquainting us with the information we need on decriminalizing petty offences. What are the international efforts on the same to alleviate this challenge? I also do have a lawyer. Yes, that is Francis Tumwesije. Francis Tumwesije is a lawyer and he's also the founder and partner at Crystal Advocates. He's so passionate and his commitment for social justice is so undeterred. Yes, he's actually championing human rights for the political, social and economic outsiders. So he shall be letting us in on who these outsiders are. Very, very pertinent conversation we are having right now. Gentlemen and lady, a very good morning and thank you for joining us.
Morning, thank you.
Of course, we are going to kick off with Francis Tumwesije. He also has a constitution petition number 36 that he's actually sued the Attorney General in 2018, challenging Section 168 of the Penal Code Act. That is Section C and D of the same. We want to know and get an update on the same. A very good morning, sir. How old for you? Skyrocketing cases of COVID-19. We couldn't be more careful.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
So the petition?
Yes, first give us the history of petty offences in this country, Uganda, then we can fast forward, go to 2018, when you sued the Attorney General challenging Section 168 of the Penal Code Act.
Okay, thank you so much. Petty offences in Uganda. First of all, what we call petty offences are those criminal offences in the Penal Code and other laws which are punishable by minor or short-term sentences or caution or punishments like community service.
1 month imprisonment,
1 month imprisonment, 6 months, 2 years. There is no defined time frame, but usually it's around 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, 2 years.
What are some of these petty
Some of these petty offences include the most famous one, the law says being idle and disorderly. The law does not also define what's being idle and disorderly. There are things like being a rogue and vagabond is also in the law, being a common nuisance. Now these are very broad descriptions of conduct which cannot be clearly defined, and that's why
and they take us back to the colonial era.
And they take us back to the colonial era because these laws originated from England, where the crown, that's the queen or the king, whoever was reigning at the time, passed these laws in order to keep laborers confined in certain estates, because then they could not move other estates, and that's how they kept them there working and paying taxes and also working for their masters. So these laws...
So these laws were some kind of apartheid system in its own form.
Yes, because then you have to keep laborers in a given estate, and then also those laborers do not cross to other estates. So these laws went to India because India became a British colony before us, with the same motivation and the same intention. When Uganda became a protectorate of the British in 1894, Indian laws were incorporated in Ugandan legal system, starting with the 1902 Order in Council, all the way to the current penal code which we have, which was adopted in 1950. But the point is that the laws are meant to keep certain classes of people away from certain societies, because then they can be able to work as laborers in that community where they are. Whereas the rest of the communities, here in Kampala we call it the low end and the high end. So the low end are there working, and they shouldn't be crossing over to the high end.
So these are the social, political, and economic outsiders you are talking about?
Yes, people are not in the thing.
Yes.
People who are on the margin of society. People are not supposed to be, for example, when you talk of some of these offenses and you want to see wandering in a place where when you cannot give a proper account of yourself.
So, in a nutshell, these laws abate discrimination and discrimination and segregation, also corruption on our people.
Yes, and the argument is that these laws criminalize status and economic means as opposed to criminalizing conduct. The criminal law should criminalize still when you can be charged with and tried to theft. But then we can't criminalize who you are or what you are as opposed to what you have done to breach the law.
Ideally, what Francis Tumesje is saying, we are criminalizing poverty. Indeed.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, because you will see how these laws are enforced. For example, the law about wandering on public highways at night. People are driving cars, usually let go. People are walking at night before curfew. For example, we found walking at midnight, police will come and sweep up whoever was walking, and nothing will be done to those who are driving.
So you're being punished for being poor.
So they are asking that those who are walking are likely to commit criminal offences, and those who are driving are busy people are going for work or they are returning home from work. So the question is the ability to commit or the intention to commit a crime determined by the means
that you have?
Or by what we call actus reus? Actus reus is actually going ahead and committing a crime.
Because I don't have to think of a crime on the road. I just have to be in the comfort of my home, premeditate what I'm going to do in the wee hours of the night, and then just go execute. You can't just wander on the road looking for whomever to attack.
Yes, but just like in the same way, a person driving has a reason to be on the road at a given time. A person on foot or in a bicycle also has a reason to be there at that given time. So the state, its obligation is to protect both the driver and the person on foot and another one on the bicycle. The state cannot then start segregating between categories of people based on the means of transport and then imputing crime on the basis of your means of transport.
This is what we'd like to know. If these laws are largely discriminative, if these laws largely abate corruption, if these laws largely violate the human rights of those poor people who are vulnerable, why has the NRM government been so adamant to expunge them from our law books? We cannot put other governments to task because they were short-lived. This NRM government has been in power for over 36 years. They are now making 40 years. We would put the Obote government, the first one, to task. We would put the Amin government to task and the Obote II government to task. But they were so short-lived. So we are looking at a government that has been in power for more than, close to 4 decades. And they've been unable to remove all these white man laws, which I'll put that in quotes. Why?
I wouldn't say the government has been adamant, but I should say maybe it has been slow because
for 40 years.
And I think it's just not a priority. I think it's not a priority. The government has many other priorities it's pursuing. But you can see there is some bit of a will because in 2009, President Museveni issued a moratorium prohibiting the police from arresting people and charging them with idle and disorderly laws. The police then moved to charging people with the next section, idle and disorderly 167, then they moved to 168, which is rogue and vagabond, until 2019. That's 10 years later. He issued another order directing the police again to stop arresting people and charging them with rogue and vagabond. And then recently I just released 832 prisoners who have been convicted of petty offenses.
You still have 2,400 in our prison system.
Yes. So what else have been abandoned? We said they are just
In fact, 24,000 people, not 2,400. 24,000 people are still in our prisons, courtesy of Frank Point and his spokesperson, languishing there on petty offenses.
Yeah, so they just released 832 and then 24,000 are still there. So I would say it's just not a priority, and that's where we are in the court. Now, there are two ways of reforming the law. You go to Parliament, usually through the government. The responsible minister presents it in Parliament. Parliament can then repeal the law. Only private members can be presented by private members of Parliament. But that route has not proved effective because it's not priority. That's why we decided to go to the Constitutional Court to seek interpretation of the Constitutional Court and declaration that these laws violate human rights standards which are incorporated in our Constitution.
If this government was giving priority to expunging of these laws, would have seen at least a ruling in this case from 2018. You sued the Attorney General 2018, that is a constitution, old paper, that is number 36. Up to now, you're still waiting for justice to be served. Don't you think priority is here, is the case?
Well, once again, every time I go to court, me and my lawyer, we are informed that the Constitutional Court, which also is the Court of Appeal, is still handling matters of 2013. We are in 2021, we are still hearing cases in 2013.
You see what I'm telling
you? And you ask, what's the matter? We say we don't have enough judges, but see we have backlog. Meanwhile, right now they've just closed that now 42 days they will not be hearing cases because COVID. Right. In spite of the presidential speech, directives actually exempting courts from the shutdowns, the suspensions.
All right. Francis Tumwesije is a co-founder and partner at Crystal Advocates. He was largely giving us a background into the history of petty offences in Uganda, straight from the colonial era to the court case that saw him sue the Attorney General under challenging Section 168 of the Penal Code Act. Now we want to know what are the international efforts that are geared towards alleviating the same, decriminalizing petty offences. I have Flavia Zalwango. She is a human rights activist and she's also the program director at Research and Advocacy at the Human Rights Awareness and Promotion Forum. Her boss is Adrian Juko. Great man. Very good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah.
I will start with
international efforts
to
decriminalize petty offences.
I think Africa, like Francis has been saying, we share the same background in terms of how our laws were put in place. Most of the countries were colonized, and we got our laws, those that were colonized by the British, from the British government. So this is a problem that all countries that were colonized by the British had the same laws. And so it became a crisis in Africa that we have these laws that continue to actually discriminate and create classes within the citizens. So the African Commission on Human and People's Rights started a campaign to call on two African countries to actually decriminalize petty offences. In 2016, they started talking about the principles to decriminalize petty offences in Africa, and our champion then was the late Commissioner Medi Kagwa, may his soul rest in peace, when he was still at the African Commission. So he started these all efforts of pushing the commission to focus on on petty offences, and later principles to decriminalize petty offences in Africa were actually put in place. And these principles give guidance to African countries on what petty offences are and what they should do to decriminalize these laws. We've seen countries like Malawi coming up with winning cases. They had a case, they won the case. We've seen countries like Kenya moving forward to file cases and having different efforts. Countries like South Africa. So there's been there's a network of of NGOs across Africa, and there's a coalition that is also looking forward to having these laws decriminalized. Of course, some countries have had some wins, others like Uganda, we are not moving, there are some efforts. So
maybe the leaders do not know these recommendations that came from the international community on how best they could expand the measures that could go a long way in decriminalizing these petty offenses. What are some of the recommendations that were made to the countries?
Some of the recommendations that were put in place, one of them was decriminalizing, putting alternative punishments and putting clear crimes. So decriminalizing petty things like smelling, like being poor. The whole issue is about being poor, because if you can't afford a perfume, it's not because you don't want a perfume. It's sometimes because your priority cannot be perfume if you don't have basics at home. So it is about basically looking at those small crimes and decriminalizing them and create laws that are non-segregating people. So we have laws that can be applied across the board, whether the poor or the rich. So such laws that are laws that the African Commission is calling up governments to actually remove on their law books. And all of them look at also amending the penal codes all the penal codes for different countries in Africa to be amended to remove laws that are irrelevant in this era, because those laws were put there by the colonialists, and they had the intentions of discriminating Africans and make sure that they don't close to their rich people's areas. So we can't have such laws. And what we are saying is that we cannot have laws that continue to put people in different categories and penalize them because of their status. Like Francis said, you can't be penalized of what you are. It's what you've done. So you can't say because you're looking poor. And I usually ask,
you look like a thief.
And you look like a thief. There is this issue of
like a suspect.
An implied thief. And I usually ask, when two people walk in a building, one is dressed like you, and another one has jeans and dreadlocks, and they're a bit shabby.
Yeah.
So, and someone's phone disappears. You can't be the first suspect. They run to the other person because they think the way he looks like a thief.
Yeah.
And we cannot in this era continue to do that. And so we are saying that we should have laws that are clear, not vague laws. And in 2016, HIRAF did a study.
Yes.
And this study generally looked at how the identity laws are implemented. And what we found out is that most of the people that have been culprits of these laws are the poor people, disadvantaged persons. And then we didn't even have national IDs. When they arrest you and you don't have a permanent place of work or a formal place of work, you won't have a formal ID. So that time people didn't have IDs. People who didn't identify themselves easily, and those are informed people in the informal sector. If you sell chapati in Nakulabye or in downtown, we'll give you an ID. So you move at night from your work, and they will arrest you. So people are put in a condition where they even fear to move freely in their country. And we're saying if someone is a thief, there is a law on theft.
Yeah.
If someone has beaten someone, there is a law. We can't start criminalizing you because you look like. And KCC has very interesting. Yeah, there's an ordinance, law. I think it's law and order amendments, ordinance, maintenance ordinance for KCCA. It is even worse. It talks about awful smell, people who go and sleep like at City Square, people who can't identify themselves, people who sell things on the streets. So for me, what is very interesting is that if you walk around, you're making noise, or you walk around, you're not clear, you smell badly, why would someone be offended because I don't smell good?
In a nutshell, human rights activists are saying these laws do not serve their purpose, which is alleviating the challenges that the poor people are going through, or even imparting human rights in that regard.
Yes.
But then why have they persisted?
I think for me, it's about there is no political will. We've seen, I think since, I don't know how many years, I think like over 20 years now, the Law Reform Commission has been compiling reports from different stakeholders on what needs to be changed in the penal code. I think in 2016 or 18, they came up, no, not 18, it must be 2014 or 15, they came up with a report on suggestions to be, suggestions of amendments in the penal code. And that report has not been given priority. Even the Ministry of Justice has not even taken efforts to actually implement the recommendations that were given by the Law Reform Commission. And when we went to Parliament, we were told that, this is part of the whole amendment that was suggesting for the penal code, and we want to overhaul the whole penal code. So we cannot choose only, pull out only one section and then move ahead with that. We need to do it as a whole. But that has been on and on and on. And the whole process is even not funded. So I think it's about political will and the government not prioritizing things that actually affect the poor. We've seen laws that are being passed in a week. But why is it that up to now we still have such laws, yet they're not even serving the purpose of criminal laws? I think criminal laws are supposed to reform people. People are supposed to reform. But if they arrest you because you're poor, how are you going to reform? Do you go and steal? Where do you get the money? You won't change because that is your status unless you work hard.
The prison spokesperson says it's hard for them to reform simply because of the short time they're held within these prisons, like a month. This person will just go back into the juvenile system that they were just picked up for. That's what he says, frankly.
The whole issue is that is actually...
The time is not enough to rehabilitate them.
It's not rehabilitation. If you're arrested because you are poor, because you are dressed badly, what do you need to rehabilitate? And the other thing is that actually people get arrested for being idle, for walking on the street at night, and then they are taken into prisons, and then they come out worse, because then they are asking themselves, why am I being a nice person, yet I was actually arrested and put in prisons with other people who have gross crimes. So the whole and the whole thing of
look at a petty offense like prostitution. Use that example. You held him there, then government is saying we didn't have enough time to rehabilitate you, then we released you, you went back to prostitution.
I think prostitution is not a petty crime per se.
They will charge you under those offenses.
Yes, but prostitution is also something different, and we don't even say prostitution, we say sex work. We believe it is actually people choose to do that work, but the whole issue is that if that is your work, why would you reform? People don't reform. They should look at things that are actually practical.
I see.
So the issue is that is what the person is. So if you arrest them for that, they won't reform.
Because there is no offense to begin with.
There is no offense. So if it is prostitution, you're taken to prison. If you choose to do sex work as your work, you will come out and then you continue with your work. So there's nothing like reforming. So the whole issue is that even the burden on the money that we spent on prisoners is even increased.
Diversion of resources.
We don't need to spend all that money on prisoners. We should also resort, one of the things that the principles also talk about is alternative punishment, like community services. Why wouldn't you, if someone has been arrested for being idle, why don't you then give them community service? They go and sweep the road and then go back home. And also the whole issue of our court system is that we have a backlog of cases, and these cases are there for long. So you find that someone has been remanded for a simple crime, and they spend there months and months, sometimes even years, when their cases have not been resolved. And at the end of the day, when they get convicted, they are given a community service.
I see.
But they've been in prison for over months.
Another case that was caught up in the net of case backlog is the constitutional, the challenge that was mounted by Francis Tumasje in 2018 as he sued the Attorney General challenging sections of the Penal Code Act 168, that is section C and D. Since 2018, up to now, the case has not been hard. First off, there was a case backlog issue from 2013. Now you do have a COVID-19 pandemic that has largely caused a lot of havoc, disruptions here and there. So that is the excuse coming in from the government that the COVID-19 pandemic has made it so hard for us to sit and listen to this case. But then what would that mean to the movement or the campaign that is geared towards decriminalizing petty offenses? Let us in on that submission. The delays.
What we can do for now, we as petitioners, for me as petitioners and my counsel, Advocate Ladislas Bakafus.
In fact, for the last 2 years, what have you been doing?
We've written letters, follow-up letters. We've met the registrar. Actually, like every 6 months.
This is Nasuna.
Yes, like every 2 months we are there meeting the registrar. And explanation is always, but look, we have cases from 2010 which have not yet been had, and we are now on 2013. Be patient, we shall reach you. That each year we have
when
like
I turn this side,
5 or 10 priority cases.
when I turn this side,
priority cases,
I'm supposed to be this side, eh?
Fit into that lot of priority cases. We had the cases in the court of appeal. It doesn't
Priority cases. That is a strong statement. Coming in from the same High Court registrar, yes, Flavia Nasuna Matobo, who also told us that these petty laws should have been expunged as soon as yesterday. She was even calling on Parliament to do its job. Now she's saying they are not a priority.
Yeah, so what they do is that they have like a queue of cases.
I see.
And like I told you, the information I have right now, they are here in case of 2013. And then we have a slot, or slots, like 5 slots, for what they call priority cases of national importance.
And those laws are not there.
And this one is not one of those. And we have, of course, like, why is the need? People's lives are at stake. Like, no, but how do you justify it? How do you say this is an urgent matter of national importance? So clearly, it's not one of those. But what we are doing is that I think the whole challenge is to do reforming the judiciary.
Yeah.
Because we have always been the leader. The Court of Appeal also working at the consumer court is just not, has not delivered as it was thought. Going forward, we need an independent constitutional court where you have branch or section of the judiciary which is fully committed to hearing and supporting law constitutional matters. Like in Kenya, so they have a human rights and constitutional division which is dedicated on human rights and constitutional matters. But here, I think the current system has also not
And here we have the police consultant Ferdinand who is going to come out and say, well, as far as we know, these laws are not because are not being implemented there because they are still in our rules. So many even the leaders know that how bad these and discriminating or corrupt these laws are, but they are willing to keep on implementing them.